This 13-year-old girl found out her father has another family. What should she do? Irene stood in front of the house hesitating for a long moment. Finally, she angrily held a stone and threw the glass door open, then quickly rode out of there. The reason she did that was she had discovered something. In that house, there was a girl like her name. Irene lives in a strict and traditional family. There are countless different etiquette and rules. Although it looked peaceful, the mother often found a pretext. That led to a quarrel that shouldn't have been with her father. Didn't know that her father had another family outside. Now Irene knew the secret. That day Irene silently followed her father to look at the girl with the same name again. She wore a backless shirt and shorts, and with a bright smile standing on stage, she looked very attractive. And her father was standing below cheering. Everyone was also chanting Irene. But Irene knew they didn't call her, but called her father's stepdaughter's name. After finished, Irene hid in the corner of the wall and watched the father's family happily laugh. She brought the confidences back home. At home, Irene's mother brought 3 sisters, each one a dress. They were steeped in joy. Only Irene sat in a corner and said nothing. After a while, Irene took her dress and returned to her room. She said her skirt was too wide, had to repair it. But she did not go to a nearby garment shop. She went to that Irene's house, because she knew that the girl's mother was also a tailor. Here she observed this woman completely different from her mother. Irene started to have first conversations. But she didn't say her real name, she said. Her name was Madalena. It's the name of the lady who cooks her house. The girl asked Irene if she wanted to go to the movies and said that her father would come too. Irene didn't say anything, but the next day, she still went to the cinema. The other girl's father didn't come. At first, the two were not sitting close. The other girl was very active and also very enthusiastic. She called Irene to sit next to her, and so on. They whispered in each other's ears and laughed. There was a handsome guy who was attracted to the second Irene. He sat near her. Seeing the brave action of the girl with the same name, Irene was dazed and gradually realized, from the audience to her father, then this guy looked like this girl had more charisma than herself. She is more loved. At that time, she did not know whether she felt curiosity, hatred, envy, or admiration in her. When she got home, Irene told Madalena that she had kissed a guy at the cinema. It seemed that Irene was starting to have irregular behaviors in her mother's eyes. Irene started to become braver, liked the girl with the same name. She stood on the cliff shouting her name. She didn't know whether it was calling the other person or calling herself. The name Irene brought the two girls together. The two gradually became friends. Irene's sister painted her nails, but she was stopped by her father, saying that Irene was still young. Thinking of the image of the second Irene and her mother, her eyes suddenly became stronger. She displeased looked at her father and called his name directly and said, "Why I cannot." Irene's sister continued again, knowing how many children a person would have. The sister tried giving her mother a test. Irene said, "It's Dad's turn." Dad said, "No need, because Mom did it. The ending will be the same." In everyone's laughter, Irene suddenly said a sentence. "Did you know there is another Irene?" The father's face was serious. The whole room was engulfed in silence, the atmosphere becoming tense. Irene explained, "I always imagined there would be an Irene living in another world. What I did, she did the same." Everyone laughed. The father said she was crazy to relieve the atmosphere in the room. No one seemed to be paying attention to her words. Two girls rode a bicycle together. They wanted to go to the second Irene's house to play, and by the way, made clothes. Irene made a backless shirt. This is the first time she has dressed like this. The tailor said today is her husband's birthday. She was trying to make a good meal. The customer next door said they had never met her husband because her husband was away from work. But this time, he would come home for his birthday. Irene was right beside hearing those words and wanted to taste the ribs and meat she cooked. It turns out that the meat he brought back before was all taken here. Irene asked her why named her daughter is Irene. She replied that is her husband meant. Irene's heart started to flutter. She put down the food in her hands. She advised Irene to drink some fruit milk. Irene firmly refused, but she still advised. Irene started to speak coldly and loudly refused. The three looked at each other shyly. No one said anything. Irene came home. The sisters started to sit and told ghost stories, waiting for her father to come home. When Dad came back, he said he ate outside. Irene stood up, saying not to eat today. She has already eaten. Looking at her father lying on the sofa, she knew that the second Irene was also waiting for him. The next day, she went to the tailor's shop again, and the sound of tragic music came out. She was working and cried. Her husband did not return last night. 2. Irene wanted to go out to play. Teenagers stand in groups in the park. The second Irene was kissing the boy who met at the cinema. When Irene saw that, she quietly left. She studied like Irene, pulled her jacket down to reveal the backless shirt, then deliberately walked past the boys' faces. But they never noticed. In a hidden corner, Irene met her sister was smoking. Unexpectedly, the 2 obedient sisters would do these things behind their parents. 2 puzzling eyes stared at each other, not saying a word. The 2 Irene situated along 2 feet out the wall, reading together. In the book about a love story, it seemed to write the feelings of these 2 young girls. At that time, their father came home. The girl pulled Irene and said, "Madalena, come see my father." Irene didn't want that. She pushed the opponent's hand away and hurriedly jumped out the window. But she was pulled back by her friend. "Where are you going?" "Irene, let me go." The fact that she knew Irene was not Madalena, she knew they were the same father. The first time Irene appeared at their house, she already knew. She saw Irene peeking behind the car. She provoked, standing next to touch her father's head. Intentionally close, looking at the father, was relaxed and happy. In complete contrast to when he was at home, Irene left, not riding a bike. When she got home, her mother had finished preparing breakfast. Irene was no longer polite as usual. She said loudly, "Take care of your affairs." She really didn't understand whether her mother didn't know these things or pretend didn't know. In the morning, Irene and her sisters wake up and played together. They still don't know what. Irene copied when her sister smoked. Her sister said, "You think I can't see you wearing a backless shirt?" Not funny at all. But Irene still imitated. She intentionally teased her, trying to forget this unspeakable secret. She felt that no one in her family understand her. Dad came home. Irene took the initiative to take off her father's shoes and sat opposite him. She solemnly asked Dad, "Do you like this place, like this family?" The father seriously said, "What are you asking, daughter? Of course I like it." The second Irene came to find her, she rode the bike she left to forget, then passed her like before she used to. The 2 exchanged shoes. It seemed like they were admiring each other's lives. 2 people sitting on a sun-dried stone, exchanging secrets with each other. The tailor's daughter said she had known this for a long time, but her mother still thought she didn't know. And Irene didn't know whether her mother knew it or not. The 2 girls sat in the room and adjusted each other's hair. Then changing the hairpin, the 2 girls differ from looks to personality. But they share the same father, the same name. They cheat, curious about each other's lives, the strange gravity that made them more and more alike. Irene, wearing a backless shirt, turned to ask her father that, if he had seen her change. The father said no, she was still his good daughter. But he felt closer to her. In fact, Irene didn't want to be her father's good daughter and mother's hanger anymore. She was about to wear that shirt to go out, but she was stopped by her mother. The mother and daughter quarreled. She wanted to be like Irene, not only for herself, but also for her mother, for this family. Irene resented because of not being understood and sympathetic. She went to a place with no people, then cried. 2 girls went to the movies, one wearing a backless shirt of each other's style, the other with a typical hairstyle. They walked the same rhythm, even their expressions were the same. In the cinema, the second Irene actively confessed to the other, but was denied. Irene sitting in the back attracted that boy. The situation was contradictory, as a signal that the 2 girls are gradually becoming silhouettes of each other. Irene came home, leaning her head on her father's shoulder, just like the second Irene did. Dad's great love was back, and the family was happy. They dressed well to go to the cinema. At the door of the theater, another Irene was quietly watching in a corner, looking at the family, her eyes complicated. Irene and Dad could not help and turned their heads to look, but no one said anything. She grasped the stone more and more tightly. That day the 2 girls sat on the ground looking towards the green forest, and spoke their own decisions. For the first time, they changed clothes and went home. "What's the matter?" "Who are you?" "Irene." "What is this game?" "I'm Irene." "Where's Dad?" Irene was at the tailor shop, on the second Irene bed. And being called out by the mother, the green curtains danced in the wind, pure and bright as a girl's heart under the sunlight. 2 13-year-old girls were in a sensitive youth when they discovered the secret of their father. They didn't choose to disclose it, but seeing it as an opportunity, bringing hatred towards his father turned into understanding. That secret is not a hindrance to their development. On the contrary, it also made them aware of the possibilities of growth. At the end of the movie, the 2 girls choose a very funny way to expose that secret. "What were you? What did you do?"